Alright everybody, diecastmania here and welcome back. Today we have a review of the Motorart 150th scale Volvo EW180C wheeled excavator. This is a discontinued model. It's been unavailable for quite some time now. For a point of reference, the real EW180C was offered from Volvo from 2007 to 2014. Obviously depending on the region it was sold in. It was introduced and discontinued at different times, but that's just about a rough time frame. So this model is well over 10 years old now, and being Motorart, they did not produce their models for super long periods of times. Unlike North Scott or Diecast Masters these days, they seem to have just produced everything in a smaller volume, and models like this and the ECR 235 just up and vanish. But anyway, the EW180C was replaced by the D model, relatively short-lived, somewhere from 2015 up until 16 or 17, and from then on it's been the EW180E, which Motorart also made a model of. And then looking before this generation, the C model, we had the EW180B, also by Motorart. So if you're looking for something in the C series, D series, you either have to pick from this or the NZG EW160, which is set up as a material handler with the cab riser, or raising cab mechanism, and the sorting grapple. So, going on with the review, this is a older Motorart model, so it kind of has those standards. But it still holds up very nicely, and it has some pretty good detail to it. The packaging, nothing really to write home about. It's standard, boring Motorart Volvo box, window box. Does the job just fine, nothing special. It's basically the same thing for every model. So moving on to functionality, this model, it rolls pretty nicely, pretty smoothly. Looking at the bottom, no steering whatsoever. It does have the drive shaft modeled. Quite obviously it rotates, just like every other excavator model out there. The blade raises somewhat acceptably, about just shy of mid-axle height, and it will go down far enough to prop the front end of the machine off the ground. And on the back side here we have the outriggers. They have hinged guards for the cylinders, and the pads are free swing, or free rotating. So yeah, you can just about set this machine off the ground, fully stabilize it for digging. Now, the functionality of the boom stick and bucket. Stick goes up pretty far, and so does the bucket. Cylinders are somewhat stiff, but they're pretty manageable, pretty smooth. This is your transport configuration. Bucket does seem to be pretty close to the machine. So this is your bucket curl in, stick in. You do get a pretty good range of motion. You can reach pretty high with this model. And your digging depth is pretty good too. Though, interestingly enough, the first part of the boom on this model, it just really doesn't travel that far, up or down at all. But the rest of the parts of the boom just work around it, and you kind of end up getting what you'd want anyway, which is surprising. And moving on to the detail. This model had some pretty good detail for its time. The hydraulic lines are separate black rubber lines, and they have gray plastic clips to hold them onto the boom. There is an auxiliary line on this. The bucket is your standard 6-tooth digging bucket, typical of Volvo excavator models. I would have liked to see smooth edge bucket, grading bucket, coupler, tilt, anything like that, but can't have everything. Typical of the Volvo Excavator models of this time, you have an opening engine compartment, and that is pretty nice. Reveals a pretty detailed Volvo engine in there, and the top of it is actually fully perforated right here, and so is the rest of the engine cover right here. Pretty good surface detailing with the anti-slip texturing. You have decently sized handrails and mirrors in plastic. Color match is good, but you know, definitely purchasing this model secondhand, definitely make sure that those are all intact, as those are some pretty usual high damage areas. Now on the back here we have your brake lights slash turn indicators, where your license plate would go, warning graphics. This side here, black painted vents, your Volvo markings. Now, the cab is pretty good, considering. So your steering column and your seat are all separate color from the rest of the interior. There's actually 3 different colors inside there. Really breaks it up nicely, and pretty good detailing. Now you have a cab guard on this model, which is kind of bizarre. You really just don't see that. You're really not doing much heavy demolition work with this machine, or at least I hope not. You know, obviously you can run a hammer off of wheeled excavators, but it just makes for an interesting, kind of confusing addition to this model. But you know, all said and done, the EW180C, it really isn't a bad model. You know, it's alright up there. And in my mind, it is actually not that far off from, say, the Diecast Masters M318F. You know, it just kind of lacks the steering and the quick coupler, but the M318's quick coupler attachments, in my mind, are kind of lacking. You know, you did get a wider smooth edge bucket, but it's kind of wonky on that machine. You know, the hydraulic line's just about the same, you know, just black rubber. But you know, you lose the steering on this, but it just looks pretty decent. You know, in my mind, it still holds up pretty well. So yeah, this is an EW180C, so it'd be comparable to your M318, Deere Hitachi 180W or 190W, I think now. So yeah, it is a pretty nice model. You really just don't see very much about these pieces. Understandable, as it was Motorart over 10 years ago, and they just seemingly seem to produce models in a much lower quantity than other manufacturers, making them harder to find down the line. But you know, having been around a 210D, I think this is a pretty decent compromise, and looks about as it should. So anyway, there you go. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. See you all in the next video.